We have successfully created a nice layout for our app, a very simple one. Now let's dive in and write some code. I'm going to select the assistant editor from the top and close the navigation pane. So now I have my view controller and the code file next to each other. So we can let the code file what we all added. You can specify that you have an outlet on your storyboard by just clicking on text field with control and drag this just on line number and just leave it on line 12. It will show this pop-up. Give a name on to your text field. I will call it search field, and you will see a property being created for this text field. Now the view controller code file knows that there is an outlet in the storyboard. Let's do the same for the collection view and call it collection view. So we have another property. Let's create an array of the type mutable array, or to be specific, ns mutable array, and call it array of images. In Objective C, we create objects, and this is the pointer. So this array of images is a pointer to our array. It's mutable because we will keep on adding images as and when we fetch from Instagram API. If you create a simple array, you can modify it once created. You can't modify once you create it. This is also added inside the interface declaration because I want it to be private to this class only. Let's control drag on the button and leave it on line 23. This is creating an IB action. An action is an event that is triggered by the user. So every time user clicks on this button, it will call this function. Let me give it a name search images, and it will be triggered when user touches this button and removes his finger off the button, hence touch up inside event. So now we have our function. There is one argument passed along with it called a sender, which is the actual button object. We will not be doing anything with memory warning, so let's get rid of this code. Also get rid of the comments in view did load, and then let's define the array of images here. We are allocating the ns mutable array here, which will create the object in memory and initialize it with init function. This is how you write nested methods in Objective C. Let's focus completely on code. So let's get rid of the storyboard file and make sure all we see is code. I will define my client ID for Instagram API here on top by using the pound sign define or pound define and call it client ID. And you can add your client ID inside the quotes. In Objective C, all string objects are added inside quotes prefixed by @sign. Let's go to search images function and create a string with the entire URL to Instagram API. You can format a string by calling a method on NSString. This method is called string with format and pass the format. If you notice carefully, the string has two percentage at the rate, which will be replaced by the string from the text field and the client ID we created. Next, let's make sure every time user clicks on the button, the array is empty. So we'll remove all the objects if they exist. Now finally, it's time to call the URL and fetch images. We can't do all this on the main thread. We have been working on the main thread all this while, and main thread is also called as UI thread, which interacts with the UI. Since we are going to do a network operation, let's move this on the background thread so user doesn't notice the delay. We can do this by calling the perform selector in background method and pass the method as a selector and also passing the argument object, which is our URL. So let's implement this method download images, which takes in the URL as an argument. The best and easiest way right now to fetch the JSON is using data with contents of URL, which is a method that belongs to NS data class. This is nothing but bytes of data downloaded from internet in Objective C byte format. Once we have this data, we can convert this into a key value pair object, also called as NS dictionary. NS dictionary has key value pairs and it looks like JSON pretty much. Here we can convert the entire JSON NS data we received in NS dictionary by calling the NS JSON serialization class method with JSON data and pass it the data. Let's go to JSON and see what we are looking for. We are interested in the images which exist inside data object in JSON. So let's add the objects from that array which exists in the key data into our array of images array. Once we are done with this, we can just reload the collection view. But since this current function runs on background thread and collection view is on the main UI, let's make sure it reloads itself on the main thread. Perfect. In Objective-C, if you want to communicate between two classes, you need delegates, or sometimes called as protocols. What it means is there can be communication between two classes using these functions. Now, UI collection view calls some protocol methods whenever something happens, and these we need to implement in our view controller. So, in short, collection view is making our view controller do some stuff based on its structure. There are two such delegate or protocols that collection view has. One is called delegate and the other one is called data source property. Let's make sure that the required methods will be implemented in our current class. The second step is our class has to follow these delegates, so we will have to make sure it knows about them. So on top near the interface declaration, let's specify these protocols inside angular brackets UI collection view delegate and UI collection view data source. When we go to the definition inside UI collection view class, you will notice there are two required methods. Let's implement these two. These two, the rest you can implement as and you need, or if your requirement needs them. We don't need them for our project right now. The first one is called collection view number of items in section. For this, we can just return the number of items we have inside the array of images. For the second one, we would have to return a UI collection view cell. Now I don't want to use the default one, which is UI collection view cell. I want to create my own custom collection view cell. Let's create a new file. There are a bunch of different types of files available here, but for this we need Cocoa Touch class. We can name it collection view cell and make sure it subclasses from UI collection view cell and press next and save it in the same directory by pressing create button. You will see both h and m file .h and .m file have been created. Let's make sure this class is imported in our view controller so it knows about the class. Let's create an instance of collection view cell by calling the dequeue reusable cell with identifier method and give the identifier as cell. What this does is over time, every time you scroll up and down the collection view, it will remove the cell which went out of view and dequeue it to be reused by the collection view to create a new cell. So it's same as Android, it will kind of reuse the cells as and when the user scrolls up and down without using much memory. Let's make sure we rename the collection view cell in storyboard to belong to class that we recently created, and then we can specify a new um, identifier, also the identifier as cell here too. Let me give a background color of light gray color to this cell. Now we get the imagery where we will have to go through the array and get, so the image array we will go get through the object at a specific index and then get the object located at images thumbnail URL. We can then pass this URL to the custom cell and call a method drawImage. This function doesn't exist yet, so it might give you an error. Let's head on to collection view cell class. Here, now I have defined the function which takes the argument, the image, which is the image URL. Let's implement this method inside the .m file. Let me create the extension where I can create some private objects. I will create a UI image view which will act as a container for my image. I can allocate this image view and then set the frame for its location. I will make sure it starts from the coordinate 0, 0 and has the same width and height as of the cell. I will also make sure that by default it has a default.jpg image displayed. Just in case if the image takes forever to download, let me drag and drop this image. It will ask me to copy the image, and then you go you go over what we call is we got here default image. Again, I will call the function draw image in background to fetch the image in a background thread by calling perform selector in background. Finally, let's add the image view to the cell. The method that runs in the background, let's implement it. We will have to do the same thing, fetch the image using data with contents of URL, and once it's there, let's just send it to the main thread using the method draw on main. Inside the draw on main implementation, all we have to do is set the image view image property to the data we downloaded. Finally, let's go back to the view controller and make sure we return the cell that we just created. One last thing, to make sure everything runs properly is to mention that our application uses internet. This can be done at info.plist file. We will have to create an entry here called as app transport security settings, add a key value pair in it, allow arbitrary loads and set it to yes. That's all. Just make sure that you can load arbitrary websites to your application. Let's run the application, search for development, and there you go. We have images. Scroll down and you will not see anything more than 20 images. This concludes our video. Here we got everything working except one which is infinite scrolling. But we learned how to fetch images and data from internet and display it in a collection view. Let's move to the next video where you can learn how to do infinite scrolling in iOS.